Yeah, I totally agree, and I'm listening and learning, and you never quit learning, and you're seeing what's going on and how some of our people, including yourself, are promoting our sport. And I don't have anything. I see nothing but an upside. I think we dwell too much on what has happened, rather than putting our efforts and our energy into what we're going to do. And there's a lot of good thoughts out there, and there's a lot of good formats out there. And I think if everybody keeps working, we can bring water skiing back to, to where it was back in the day.
Right, welcome back or welcome to the Water Ski Podcast. My name is Matteo and the goal of this podcast is to promote water skiing through the voices of the people in the sport and through other kind of content that sometime I will provide on my own. However, this week I am beyond stoked to share the first of a two-part interview with the great Jay Bennett. I was at Bennett's. It's going to be a little over 2 weeks ago now, where there was a collegiate water ski tournament for the South Central region and also a little record tournament on Sunday. And so I had a chance to ski the Sunday tournament, and then on Monday morning I had a long sit down with Jay, and I asked him the questions that I've always wanted to ask him. And it's a pretty cool dynamic because I've known Jay for a long time, and still being able to pick his brain on things that are important, at least to me, was a moment that I'll treasure for a long time. Now, this week's part, so first part, it's about Jay's beginnings. So how he got involved into the sport, how, like his first tournaments, how he ended up building Bennett Ski School, and how he managed to organize very successful tournaments over the years. The second part, which will come in 2 weeks' time, will be about coaching. So an episode strictly about his coaching philosophy, how he approaches coaching with athletes, and what he deems to be successful water ski coaching. Next week, I'm going to commentate a little bit on the Collegiate Water Ski Nationals, which are occurring this week in California. Super stoked to see if my Cajuns can bring the title back to Lafayette, Louisiana. But in the meantime, I hope you guys enjoyed this conversation with Jay. Please look at the show notes. You'll find some useful links to learn more about Jay and his ski school and some of the cool things that he's involved with. And enjoy the Collegiate Nationals. I believe there will be a webcast. Follow the scores, cheer on your favorite team, and let's reconnect next week. Okay, should we start?
I'm ready.
Okay. Well, Jay, thank you so much for giving me this interview. Lovely to be at your site for the weekend. We just wrapped up a weekend of competition. How was it? How do you think it went?
We had a really whirlwind week this week. Coming into the tournament, we were fortunate enough to have Paramount Studios out here doing some filming for a TV episode. So as soon as we got rid of that, we got to roll into a tournament, and you kind of know what it takes to get involved with getting your site ready for a water ski tournament. And it was hosted by the Collegiate Water Ski Team, ULM, up in Monroe.
Yep.
And we were just kind of like site host, and we've worked with all those guys a long time, but I think we had a great weekend. We had really good conditions. The performances were a lot of personal best performances, so overall, really good.
Yeah, no, I mean, what was it? I think I was looking at the results, and there was someone that jumped 168 or 169 in the men category that was 10th.
Yeah, we were whole bunch of jumps on a 5-foot ramp at 31 miles an hour, over 170 feet, and they went as far as 189 feet, and Carlo from ULL put one out there.
Yeah.
So it was exciting to watch men's jump, but the women did very well also.
Yep.
And we had good slalom performances. It's kind of fun here at this site because we have the ability to run dual events, and that means you're running simultaneously slalom on one lake at the same time you've got tricks or jumping going on the other. So it has a lot of activity. It's an action-packed situation and never any downtime. So it makes it more fun for everyone that's involved.
Yeah, double the organization efforts, making sure you have judges all over, drivers ready to go, boats ready to go.
Yes, it changes the complexity of a tournament when you go from one lake to two lakes, and it takes a lot of manpower. You're absolutely right about that. So we had a great team, and I think everybody had a great weekend.
Sweet. And the way I like to start this interview with you, Jay, is like hearing about your beginnings. Like to begin with, how did you get involved into water skiing?
Well, the actual beginning of water skiing started when I was about 6 years of age. My parents had a camp on a body of water that's called False River. And it's about 25, 30 minutes out of Baton Rouge. And they enjoyed their weekends, and we had every summer we'd leave on Friday afternoon, come back home on Sunday night to get ready for the work week. I grew up in a very, very much blue-collar working family. Dad worked in the industry, so the weekends were their release and our pleasure. So I came up in water skiing with some older people that were friends with my mom and dad and actually had a water ski club on False River. And so they taught me how to ski, and I was fortunate enough to start learning how to ski when I was 6 years old. But, things were a lot different back then.
Right.
The boats, the skis, everything was quite different. But that's how I got my start with it.
What years were they? What
What's
are we
that?
talking about? What year was that?
I go back to thinking about competition. So my first competition years was 1965. So that's,
Right around that time.
Yeah, around 60 probably is when I learned how to ski, if I'm dating it. Yeah.
What was the club life like? So you said you had your parents' friends at a club. Like, was there a lot of members, a lot of skiing going on?
It was more of a social club, and they did ski shows back then. They loved to do the pyramids and do some barefooting and, do the round the boat. Even back then, some of your basic acts back then were similar to some of the things you see with amateur clubs nowadays. It's just a difference in equipment and knowledge.
Right.
But it wasn't really a tournament-orientated group. They had a few people in that group that would venture off to tournaments. Mm-hmm. And back in the day, the tournaments were not every weekend, and tournaments were spread out all over. So you had to travel to go to tournaments. So the access to them wasn't what it is today.
Yeah. And how did you get started into that? Like, what made you go from being involved into this club where people was doing some show skiing, some recreational skiing, to actually venture off to tournaments?
You could see water skiing at a competitive level on TV quite often back then. So that would spur your interest. And then my neighbor on False River, 2 or 3 camps down, he went to a water ski school in Sarasota, Florida, by the name of Joe Cash.
Oh, yeah.
So he spent 3 weeks at Joe Cash Ski School and learned about tournament water skiing, learned about barefooting, learned all the different things that were available and out there. And he comes back and he says, Jay, you're not going to believe this. This is what I learned. You got to get involved with this, and we got to go to tournaments, and et cetera, et cetera. So my mother and dad investigated the American Water Ski Association, found out that was our sanctioning body.
Yep.
And I remember that part of it like it was yesterday. We did family vacations where you load up the station wagon and you go for 2 weeks vacation. So we went down to Florida, and I got 1 hour's lessons to where I could get my AWSA ratings at a young age, about 10 years of age, at a ski school, Richard Johnson Ski School in Winter Haven, Florida.
Okay.
So I got my barefoot rating of 1 minute. I've got a trick rating of a 3rd class. I think I got about a 2nd class rating in slalom. And so now I had the ratings I needed to be able to tournament water ski. And that's how it kind of started for me.
Interesting. So back then you had to get some ratings in order to be able to compete?
Yeah, you join the association, and then back then there was ratings from 3rd class all the way up through what we call EP ratings.
Oh, right. Yeah, I heard of those.
And that was the basis of getting qualified for tournaments. But they really didn't have to have a qualification to go to the tournaments. That was just a way of being sanctioned that you were in the association and involved with it.
Okay. And wow, long-term involvement since then, I believe, right?
Yeah, long-term involvement. That was a start. My parents did everything they could to, get me around the tournaments. And like I said, back then, you traveled quite a long way to be able to go to tournaments, and it's not like it is nowadays where you can stay within an hour or two of your home in a lot of locations and go to tournaments every weekend. It wasn't like that. It'd be 6, 7, 8 tournaments in the course of a summer, and you travel,
Right.
10, 12 hours to get to a tournament. So that was a real difference.
Yeah. And what was your first tournament like? I'm sure you remember that.
I remember the first tournament. It was in Port Gibson, Mississippi, which was not very far from here. And back then, based on how we classify a good site, it was an excellent site in the day because it was a private man-made lake. And the
Wow.
majority of the places we skied back then were not private man-made lakes.
Right.
And I say private man-made lakes in the form of a dammed-up quarry, a dammed-up reservoir, and a little quarry in Mississippi. So the conditions were really, really good. And Port Gibson, Mississippi wasn't very far from here.
Right.
And I remember all the judges, the people like Pete Selassie, Jeffrey and Ralph Armstrong, Billy and Nita Reeves, all those people open arms to my mother and my dad to have me at the first competition that I've ever been in my life, and really showed us the way. And those people mentoring us at a young age in my skiing career was what kept me into skiing, to be very honest with you.
Right. So it sounded like you had a good experience, both you and your family, at this first tournament. What about the actual skiing? How did you ski?
It's crazy. You remember some of the things that you do, and you don't remember a lot of the things that you do through competition. But I guess because it was a start for me, I remember there was 15 junior boys back then. It was junior boys, men. They didn't have the number of divisions they have nowadays.
Right.
And I remember in slalom that I split it right in the middle. I finished 7th.
Okay.
So I thought that was really good.
That's
And I don't remember if I even tricked and definitely, there wasn't any jumping at that age. And my jumping I didn't start actually competing or actually going over a ramp and jumping until I was about 16 years of age. And that was based on a bone disease that I have, osteogenesis imperfectus, which is a tartar stage, very mild stage. But my parents said, no jumping for you. And I watched an awful lot of overalls go out the window because I couldn't ride over the ski jump. And later I was able to start jumping and really enjoyed it. So
how did you convince them to go over the ramp?
I think I finally got of an age and strength level they decided to let me do it. The bone thing was always an issue in my parents' mind, and here's another interesting piece of information. J.D. Morgan actually was tournament skiing back then and was based in Oklahoma. And J.D. was an icon in our sport even at that time, and everyone looked up to him. And I have to give J.D. credit for getting my parents to get comfortable with allowing me to go on the water and competing and not to worry about the fractures, because he was really the one that really kind of said, hey, this okay, let him do it. And so I owe him a lot for that.
Yeah. And I want to hear your opinion on this, because I've interviewed Igor Morozov a couple of weeks ago, and he talked about how jumping is a bit of like you really have to want it, right? Like it can be something that is imposed from parents or from surroundings. Like it has to be something that you decide, okay, now it's the time, I really want this, I want to go over. And it sounded like you got to that stage around 16 when you said, Mom, please, can I go over the ramp? Was that how it was?
Well, that's exactly what happened. You sit there from a young age and you watch everybody, going over the ramp, and it's so fun, it's so exhilarating, it's such a adrenaline rush. And I felt like I could do it because I sat there and watched it for so many years. Mm-hmm. And there wasn't any real teaching methods other than the basic things. And I had a fairly good balance because of skiing for that length of time. So when I actually went over the ramp for the first time, it was fun, and it was not a bad experience. I rode off my first jump and kind of went from there.
Yeah, and I think that first experience is crucial, isn't it? Like
Yes.
that, being able to have a fun time, safe, obviously.
Yeah.
And I know you provide that here at Bennett Ski School. Speaking of which, so you were skiing on a river. How long did you ski on the river for?
Well, we actually only body of water I had was False River that I skied on, and we actually started our water ski school on False River.
Ah, okay.
And with it being a public body of water, we knew eventually if we were going to grow the thing, we would have to, get to private facilities. And then I spent some time down on a bayou Plaquemine. A group of guys down there, headed up by Lonnie Marchand, decided they want to try to get a water ski club started.
Yep.
And we went down there and worked with those guys. So we had some nice tournaments down there also. And then they evolved into being very, very heavily involved with the kneeboarding world and had a lot of kneeboard tournaments down there also.
Okay.
So, but I basically, until we got the ski school up and running, we were on False River, and then I went into a partnership with a gentleman named Johnny Jackson at a sports resort over in Tyler, Texas. The 1980 National Water Ski Championships were at this site. It was a remarkable site. Had a tremendous number of amenities for back in the day. And so we had a one-year lease or one-year hiatus there in Tyler, Texas with Johnny, and then we found this place that we're at now and came back and purchased it and started our ski school here with Private Lakes in Zachary.
So when you found the place here in Zachary, what was the condition? What was it being used for? What was this land utilized for?
I think it's a very unique story. There's always a lot of luck involved, but I'll give you the story. It's Mike and Nikki Lee worked for me at our school in Texas. Both of those guys were from Texas. Mm-hmm. And another family, C.J. Haynes and his wife Ray, they were skiing with us on False River. Their kids got involved with competition skiing. So the club continued to exist at False River when we left for that year. But when we wanted to try to find a place, through talking with different people, we had located this old abandoned catfish farm. A realtor in Baton Rouge owned it. And so here I am at 24 years of age, and I'm going to be the guy that's going to try to negotiate us buying this piece of abandoned catfish farm. And it's a total of 63 acres, and they had about 11 different ponds on the property. Mm-hmm. And so I sat down with the realtor and kind of said, hey, we'd love to buy your old abandoned catfish farm. And he says, well, what do you want to buy this piece of property for? I said, well, we want to build water ski lakes on it. Now, you can imagine sitting at the table with a successful realtor, and I'm 24 years old, and he's looking at me like I'm the craziest person he's ever talked to. He said, well, what are you going to do after you build the water ski school lakes? I mean, you're going to build the lakes. What are you going to do? And I said, well, we want to start a water ski school on it. Now, he had no idea that I'd already been in the process for about 3 years and kind of felt like we had the opportunity to make something work along with the two partners. So he said, well, okay, do you have any money? Well, how are you going to pay for this? I said, well, we really don't have very much money. I was hoping maybe you would consider owner financing it. He goes, okay, and I can just see I'm getting deeper and deeper in there. He goes, well, what do you have for a down payment? And I said, well, we've got $30,000 that we can put down. We had 3 families. We all had $10,000 that we were going to put down, so we could put down $30,000. Well, at this time, the guy's light switch goes off, and he's got it. Now he's tapping on his calculator, and he's figuring out years and interest and stuff like that. And he said, okay, I'll consider doing that. And so he gave us the terms, and at that point in time, the leverage was over.
Right.
And, it was a facility that no matter what we did, we could not have made it any worse. I've built a lot of lakes since then. I've been a consultant on many, many projects. And you would never allow anybody to go about building lakes like we went about it.
Okay.
And it was also it's a 100-year floodplain. So there was no value out here, and he figured I'd pocketed $30,000, and if they fall on their head a month or a year later, I still made the money, and there's nothing out there they can hurt. And that's how it got started, and we made it.
Yeah, well, clearly you've made it, So when did you start operating?
Operating here, we started digging in 79 and got the first lake roughed in, and we actually opened spring of 80 here.
So spring of 80, you did some ski school rides.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you remember those?
Yeah, it was crazy because there was no infrastructure here.
Okay.
A couple of little mobile trailers. We had a boat launch on the very first lake. The lake wasn't even brown from digging it. It was red. It was so muddy and so dirty. There was no grass anywhere around. The students, we had 4 students a week, and we had a tarpaulin off the side of a gas tank by the boat launch, and that's where they had to sit to wait for their ski rides. Right. It was very, very primitive. But the thing was, it was ours, and it was private water. We didn't have to worry about another boat being on the lake, and that's really how we went from that point in time on. And in a very short period of time, we got the other lakes roughed in and got involved with bigger tournaments. We had the South Central Regional Water Ski Championships here the next year in 1981. And then at 26 years of age, I was I was EVP of the South Central region for some silly reason. I must have thought I knew something about, organizations and politics, and I found out real fast at 26 I didn't know anything.
Right.
But we bid on the National Water Ski Championships for 1984 and received the bid.
Wow.
And once again, the site was not anywhere close to being ready, and we didn't have the resources to get the site ready. So then again, I had to go back into the business mode and come up with the finances to be able to put in the infrastructure. And that's a pretty neat story how that went about.
Well, that's, to me, and let me understand if I hear the story correctly. You wanted a ski school, and yet at age 24, sit down at the table with a realtor, try to convince him to sell you his catfish farm abandoned.
Absolutely.
For this crazy project.
Yeah.
And then you manage to get a lake going, and then you have a tournament. So that brings in yet again you and now age 25 or 26 to figure out a way to make it work, right? So it looks like skiing, wanting to ski and doing tournaments really helped you develop into what you are today.
Yeah, if anyone thinks they don't make it in any type of venture, any type of passion without a support group, they're not thinking correctly.
Yeah.
I had so many people that were helping us out, drivers, judges, construction people, mentors, that were excited to see what we were doing. So you can't ever lose sight of how many people were involved. It was not a me thing. Yeah, I was at the front. I think I had the passion. I think I had the drive and the work ethics, but you don't do it by yourself. So many people helped us get up and going, and same thing today. We're very successful in what we do, but you don't do it by yourself. You got a tremendous support group that makes you successful.
Yeah. No, what I'd like to know is, so in these first years, you're quickly getting exposure. You're organizing tournaments, very important tournaments. Were you still skiing at the time?
It all started because I was an okay skier in a 6-state region. I did very well in competing in my area and had a reputation as being a good skier. So we were strictly a 3-event water ski school, and was strictly for slalom, trick, and jump.
Yeah.
And small numbers. And, of course, it's evolved into a totally different business plan now, but that's how it got started.
Mm-hmm. But you were still competing at the time? Were you still going to tournaments whilst having ski school and having to organize events? That sounds like a busy life.
Well, I think you can relate to that because you've done a good bit of that yourself. And
right.
What happened for me is that I ended up 2 reasons. I did compete, and I tried to stay competitive. And, when you go into something like this, you build it hoping to be able to use it. And with the physical situation and the time and the passion to build a business, eventually my personal water skiing went away. But I continued to compete. Was fortunate enough to get on the dock at some of the pro events.
Wow.
Good enough to qualify and get out there and ski. And can't say I ever got on the podium. My coaching is taking me to higher levels, thank goodness. But all those are learning experiences, and it was fun to do that. And back then, it absolutely was not about the money. It was the best skiers going to a tournament and enjoying the passion of the sport. And if someone won some money, they won some money. But eventually I had to let the water ski part of it go on a serious level. I think my last competition was somewhere like it was national championships in my age group, 1991, I think.
Okay.
Somewhere like that. So it just slowly slipped away.
Okay. What about those, like, tell me those experiences of doing some pro tournaments? Because obviously, I'm assuming it was like it is now. You have to reach a certain level, and then you qualify, and then you go and you're on the dock with people you've been looking up to, seeing on magazines. What was that experience like for you?
You know, I think it's a lot like today in the fact that, yes, you had to qualify. You had to be at a certain level. You just didn't sign up and go ski. Everybody's very supportive. You're friends with most all of them.
Yep.
Better friends and acquaintances. The tournaments were quite something. You know, we always go back to being very, very proud of right here in Louisiana at what we call the Tournament of Champions, which was in Shreveport, Louisiana. And it was created and had such backing. And, of course, Mastercraft was the boat company with Rob Shirley. Can't give Rob Shirley enough credit for what he did for our sport in the early startups of pro water skiing.
Yep.
But we had incredible crowds. And it was slalom, trick, and jump. You know, not always tricks, but most of the time slalom, trick, and jump, all three events. And it was just a very exhilarating time, an awful lot of fun. We had quite a bit of media coverage.
Yep.
Really a neat time in my life to be able to be involved with that. And then after I was fortunate enough to be in the loop, and I also was a judge at that time. And I remember, the chief judge at most of those pro tournaments, especially Tournament Champions at that time, was a gentleman named Tony Baggiano. And Tony did an incredible amount for our sport. And he asked me and my wife, Ann, to be judges. So there for several years we judged. And then the coaching part started kicking in. And I started having some skiers that were able to get out there and be on that tour. And so I stepped aside from the judging,
Right.
because didn't want to have any kind of conflict. So it's just how it kind of evolved from the skiing to the judging to being involved from a coaching standpoint.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm curious to hear, for you as a skier, what was it? Because, I'm doing some pro tournaments, and obviously they are, I would say, the pinnacle of our sport, where you want to be, the most challenging, but certainly not with the crowds that you had on the shore when you were doing it. And I just want to hear your experience of getting on the dock, crowds all over the shore, and you still have to perform.
Yeah, it was incredible because the people just really got into it. Think about it. We were talking about in the middle of the day in Shreveport, Louisiana, in 90-plus degree weather.
Right.
And those people are engaged and loving every minute of it. And the process was straight up, slalom, trick, and jump. The announcing was very professional, and most of the time we had some type of TV.
Yeah.
So I think just being in that arena, just the excitement to be able to be qualified and be out there and be in that arena because your passion for the sport. I think the passion for the sport is still the same. I go to a pro tournament now and I see so many skiers engaged, so many people trying to help each other, so many people traveling from all over the world to ski at a pro event. So that part hadn't changed.
Uh-huh. And you see, that's one of the things I really want to pick your brain on, because you've competed in early pro tournaments. You've mentored athletes you started mentoring athletes afterwards that went to these tournaments, and then you organized yourself some pro tournaments in recent years, right? And certainly you've been a mentor for me when I decided to do this crazy thing and do it myself. But I want to hear your opinion on potentially what's working right now and what is missing.
Well, that's a great question. I'm gonna back up a little bit for a little bit more history. So, 1984 National Water Ski Championships were here, and along with the National Water Ski Championships at that point in time would be your U.S. Open.
Right.
So all your pros came in for the weekend, and you had a group of water skiers that just finished skiing in the National Water Ski Championships. So you had a captive audience as well as the people that would come in from the advertising that you did locally.
Yep.
So it was really neat for the amateur skiers to be able to be able to see the pro skiers at the U.S. Open. So in 1984, it was our first one, would be the first pro event that we did here. And so then, I said, I'll never do another National Water Ski Championship again in my life. I don't know if I've ever, even young and energetic, ever done anything any harder or any more expensive.
Right.
And I turned around and I bid on it in 1989, and we did it again. And once again the same format. And
Right.
then, just to give you some background, electronics have evolved unbelievably in the TV world. You see these guys carry little cameras and things such as that, and there's so many different ways to promote it. Well, we had a 18-wheeler truck here in the back at the base of Lake One,
Yep.
and it was the TV truck, and it was a full 18-wheeler truck with every type of electronics that I could possibly imagine. Looking in there, seeing screens everywhere, and they literally would run. They wanted in-course for slalom, and they put scaffolding, and they ran hard lines, big, thick hard lines all over this facility. It was a massive undertaking to set up TV for the U.S. Open.
Wow.
But that was really neat to see that.
And that was already in 84 or 89?
Yeah, 84, I believe, is when they did it. And I'm not too sure. I think we still had the TV here in 89.
Because in my, younger generation that came afterwards view, those were the golden years of water skiing, right? You had hot summer nights on Monday nights on ESPN.
Yeah.
Skiers were making good money,
Yeah.
right? What happened afterwards?
It's always a good question. I was involved with the pro event when wakeboarding came into play in 1995.
Yeah.
And actually, wakeboarding was fortunate enough to get exposure coming in and piggybacking on our events.
Mm-hmm.
So wakeboarding was added. And you've got to understand the industry's motivation also. They have to make a living. So this was a new era at that point in time, right in there where it kicked in, and the industry started diversifying quite a bit at that point in time. So we were not slalom, trick, and jump anymore. And what was always been neat, in my opinion, I was a barefooter. I love barefooting. I barefooted at a pretty good level, and the barefoot competition always held its own. It always had its own venue.
Yeah.
And then it's show skiing. Man, I think that's still one of the most exciting things in the world to watch some water ski shows nowadays. So I just loved every part of our sport. But as things evolved into the sponsorship stuff, I really think that our sponsorship dollars got what's the proper word? Got spread out too much,
Mm-hmm.
and it was too many different venues that they had to support, and I think that was the start of our demise of coming down with in 3-event water skiing.
Yeah. So basically, wakeboarding coming in and really joining the same venues, the same tournaments that water skiing had, like the sponsorship money spread thin, and
Correct.
eventually wakeboarding popularity peaked.
It definitely jumps. It definitely was something new. It was something the spectators liked to see. It jump-started them big time,
Yeah.
without a question. I remember it like it was yesterday.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so the industry also changed, right? So boat manufacturers started to make boats for wakeboarding specifically, because at first it was just water ski boats that were adapted.
Absolutely.
Ski companies started to create wakeboard divisions and creating boards. And so the skiing gigs started to decline. Do you remember those years well?
I remember it very well. At one point in time, 3-event water skiing, especially slalom and jump, was so strong we had 2 tours.
Okay.
And we even had 2 tours in the same city. We had one in Dallas on the same weekend. We had one in Dallas and one in Fort Worth.
Wow.
And some of the skiers were trying to ski both events. And Sherry Sloan, who's a young lady that I mentored for a long, long time, and she was part of our staff here, was fortunate enough at that time to dominate women's jump.
Mm-hmm.
And we worked out a schedule where she was able to ski in both of those tournaments. And it was just, some of it was luck, some of it was pre-planning. But
Yep.
she came out for one podium, put the skis on, and went out and got back on the other podium. So that weekend she won both pro events.
Isn't it crazy?
So that was pretty exciting, pretty cool deal. Something that probably never happen again. Some of the skiers, I won't name any names, tried to do both of them, and slalom, how complex it is.
Yep.
And how you get in these runoffs and these ties. One particular skier that I was thinking about, he was at one of them, he finished skiing, he got in his car, ran over to ski in this one. Well, he was in a tie to make it into the finals at this one.
Right.
And he couldn't get back to run off the tie because he was skiing in the other one. So that didn't work out so well for him.
Yeah.
But with Sherry that weekend, it worked out really good.
And I think it goes to show, one, how crazy, attention there was to the sport, because for someone to decide to organize 2 pro tournaments in the same weekend, I'm assuming these tours had different sponsors.
Two different organizations,
you know.
two different sets of sponsors, but it just shows you how strong it was at that time.
Yeah. And I think, you might have heard that there are some efforts in Europe right now to create a European tour with separate sponsorships and separate point system. And I think it sounds to me whilst 2 events in the same weekend is exciting, I think organizing efforts to make sure that the top skiers can ski all events possibly is a way to go, so that,
Yeah, I totally agree, and I'm listening and learning, and you never quit learning, and you're seeing what's going on and how some of our people, including yourself, are promoting our sport, and I don't have anything. I see nothing but an upside. I think we dwell too much on what has happened rather than putting our efforts and our energy into what we're going to do. And there's a lot of good thoughts out there, and there's a lot of good formats out there. And I think if everybody keeps working, we can bring water skiing back to where it was back in the day.
Yeah, or somewhere different, as you said. Maybe stop looking in the past and just trying to understand where the sport needs to go now. Because we're 25, 30 years later, the industry has changed, the way in which we ski has changed. So that advice is taken very well, obviously.
Hey, just taking a little break. I hope you're enjoying the interview so far. Just a quick reminder about helping out with the promotion of the podcast, which in my mind is equal to promoting the sport of water skiing. So if you want to help out, if you're listening to this podcast on Apple Podcast, make sure to subscribe if you're not subscribed. Just give a little 5-star review or whatever review you want to give, and even write a review. All these things Apple considers to push the podcast up on the charts, which is really my main drive and the way in which I think we can promote water skiing through the podcast channels. Also, if you feel like donating, if you want to help out with the various costs of this, you can go on thewaterskipodcast.com/support, and you can find ways in which you can support over there. Sorry for the interruption. Back to the interview with Jay.
You did organize, though, a number of tournaments in recent time. To me, I remember, obviously, LA Ski Jam. So how did that tournament even started?
That's, we always wanted to do pro events here.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to back up. After we did the U.S. Open in 84 and 89, then the next pro event that we did was the Carrington Cup. And that was for Jeff Carrington, who unfortunately had a very bad accident doing stunt work. And so this was a fundraiser for Jeff.
Yeah.
So that was still, in 1997, that was still 3 events. So that was our next pro event that we did out here. So the way LA Night Jam came about is Orrin Clout at Mastercraft, myself, and other people involved were still looking at these formats. What can we do with a format that will draw the crowd? So it was a group effort. I can't take credit for being the brain thrust behind it, but Stuart Morrison had started some night jump in London, England, and we saw it was being very successful. So we thought about LA Night Jam being kind of like to the general public for advertising, like a dinner and a movie. You finish everything you're doing on a Saturday or a Sunday, and then you're looking for some kind of entertainment, whether you're going to go to the movies, get a bite to eat, you're going to go Top Golf, whatever you're going to do. And so we said, that's the format that's going to work for us. We can draw crowds in here. We're going to do entertainment.
Right.
So we do the preliminaries, and we did a little test market we had the INT National Water Ski Championships here, and so we did a little test market. We brought in the lights, and we brought in here on staff, I had about 3 pro jumpers at that time that could participate.
Right.
And then Freddie Krueger came in, and I think we brought in Scott Ellis, and we did a pro tournament for the entertainment of the INT audience, which at that time was about 1,000 people. Back to the same thing of having a captive audience in '84 and '89 for the U.S. Open. We had all the INT people there who loved water skiing. Jumping was not part of the INT competition, so it was even more exciting for them to see this. So then on the flip side of that, I brought in potential sponsors. I made an afternoon of entertainment for potential sponsors, and I invited people that I knew that owned companies. And so Freddie and those guys got an appearance fee where they got paid a little bit of money, and so that's where LA Night Jam started. It was incredibly it was received tremendously well by the INT people, and so then we just started building it into a format.
Yep.
So the next year is our first big year, and advertising dollars are always limited, very limited. And I think what makes LA Night Jam special, and that we're capable of drawing crowds, is that we have boots on the ground doing what I call guerrilla marketing 6 months out.
Right.
We have boats at restaurants handing out flyers. We've got the little town of Zachary really backs this event. We've got street signs, yard signs everywhere, just really down to getting the word out by word of mouth and hitting the streets. And then we were fortunate enough to partner with a good friend of mine and also the general manager of iHeart. And so they came in a couple of years later, and that really gave us a big boost on local advertising.
Yeah.
So the reason back to the format, which is a critical part to me, we do preliminaries during the day, even 2 days of preliminaries. Our last big night jam, we had 44 entries, and this was jump only.
Yep.
And it was 170 feet for the women to qualify to get into the finals, and 220 feet for a man to get into the finals. Now, that's some really serious jumping.
Which I think it speaks a lot about, the level of jumpers, obviously the sheer numbers that you had here competing to make it, and the quality of your site. Because, 220 to make a cut of top 8?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
It's crazy. And, it's done today, but that was the first time you saw those kind of numbers. And, you got to give credit to Mastercraft. They were the boat sponsor. They put the power in the boat to get those performances. So it's a combination of everything: a nice site, a good ski jump, incredible athletes, and a boat that had the power it needs to get those skiers to those distances. So we get done with the preliminaries, and we get ready for LA Night Jam. We open the gates at about 5 o'clock, and there's entertainment on site. You got iHeart taking care of having a national band in here. We've got music playing. You've got all your food vendors. And, of course, in Louisiana, it's about food and drinks.
Yep.
No doubt about it, And so we do a 2.5-hour show. It's a tournament to us, but it's a show. And why is it? It's a show? We're doing show ski acts. We got barefooters. We got freestyle jumpers. We're doing things that are just entertaining to the audience. You're here in Louisiana, LSU, Louisiana State University. We're talking about the Tigers, okay?
Right.
We got a jumper doing a clown jump out in a tiger uniform.
Right.
Silly things like pulling people over the ramp on a water weenie, but it's entertaining
to the
general
crowd.
Public. So there was always something happening, little fireworks, and there's never a minute something's not on the water. But the finale is the women's and men's jump. And
Okay.
when this crowd that's not really a water ski crowd at night sees that person fly through the air, the distances, they are ecstatic. They're just screaming. And we get the same effect from slalom skiing because we also do slalom in every one of those events. But because of limited prize money, it had been exhibition.
Yep.
But they're seeing the spray at night. They're seeing the speed of the skier. We did different formats, like we put a man against a woman. We put the best man skier in Louisiana against the best lady skier in Louisiana, which was my daughter at that time. We did different formats. We brought in pros, and they went head-to-head with each other. So we know what the effect of slalom at night is also, and it was
Right.
always part of our show. Same thing with trick skiing. So basically, the concept is keeping it short and keeping action on the water and making it a festival-type atmosphere. And that's
Yeah.
why I think we did well.
Yeah, and I think one of the, at least to me, who, as you know, I've been delving with doing this for a while, it's the balance of creating a show that is entertaining for people, being worried about the organization of all of that, so food vendors, sponsors being happy, crowd, parking, like all of these things, and yet provide conditions for the skiers to compete at the highest level, right? Because I think lately we've had the two extremes, right? So it's either, yes, we can draw a crowd here. It's this body of public water, which could actually be dangerous, or even if it's not going to be performances that the skiers are going to be ecstatic about. Or private man-made lake, great pro tournament, but for a crowd of the competitors that are there watching. How do you manage? I mean, that's quite impressive. You had both, the best of both worlds.
Well, I think because we did the marketing with boots on the ground, we can get the general public out here that aren't water skiers.
Yeah.
I think that's it. And what you just brought up is what we're all of us that have a love for the sport are trying to figure out how we blend the two together.
Yeah.
You know, back when I skied, most everything was on public water.
Yeah.
When we were on Falls River and we had our ski school and we had the milk jugs out there as our slalom course.
Yeah.
It was an unbelievable amount of people that would try to do the slalom course. So as we evolved in our sport and we needed better facilities, we pulled ourselves off of the public water and we pulled ourselves away from the general public's eye, along with not having the TV and the things that we had that brought water skiing to the general public. So our biggest challenge
Yeah.
is to get it back into the public's eye. And that's the challenge. And no one has the silver bullet. When we go to an event where they have the prize money and the water conditions are very sketchy, these athletes are so good at what they do nowadays and have so much at risk with an injury. We understand that there's always going to be a risk involved, even if we're on a perfect private man-made lake, because of the speed and the physical force that you put on your body.
Yeah.
So bringing the two together is our question, and that's one of the things I really like about some of the formats that everyone's throwing on the table and some of the formats that are already working. I think we're headed in the right direction.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the one that is going, I think it's interesting how the whole US Open aspect is almost coming back, because the format that is working nowadays is what we call the Pro-Am format, right? So you have amateur skiing and pro skiing in the same event. So you have a little bit of that. Of course, the numbers are different, but a little bit of that US Nationals folks that stay and watch the US Open, but at the same time, you have pro skiing, and you try to figure out a way to sell that package to draw non-skier attention in, right? And I think the challenge is, as you alluded to, is like knowing your local area, know what works for the area that you're organizing your event in, and try to capitalize on that.
I totally agree. And anytime we have the opportunity to tie our sport into another major event, that's a good chance for us to have great exposure also.
Yeah, yeah. So so I think one of the things I like to touch on is that this is way more than a ski school, right? Like, you're selling boats, you're servicing boats, you have a pro shop, you're drawing attention from, summer camps of people that are learning how to ski, to professional skiers or wanting to be professional skiers that come here and train in the hopes of becoming a pro skier. Like, this is a pretty big operation.
Well, I believe it's 43 years now that we've had a school. And I think with any business, you always have to shift gears, change directions, have a business plan of where you're going to go and where you're going to get your numbers. We're very large. The ski school side of the business is what we established first.
Yep.
And then, as you well know, we're a Mastercraft boat dealer.
Yeah.
And my daughter and son-in-law do a really good job of running that segment of our business. And we have the pro shop. So the pro shop started off really in like a 10 by 10 building with some gloves and handles, and as an accessory to the people that came to the ski school. And also realized the ski school started off with like 4 students a week.
Right.
You know,
Right.
and we're pretty solid 6 months out of the year at 26 a week now. So I don't know, that there's any bigger numbers than that. But the biggest thing is our diversity. We cater to a lot of different water sports.
Yeah.
We're still very much the bread and butter of 3-event water skiing, but at a lot of different levels.
Right.
The collegiate world has always been something that I've been involved with, and I've always tried to be very supportive of collegiate water skiing. And so that even starts back in the 70s, the late 70s, when we got the program started up at ULM, which back then was NLU, is now ULM, and my staff would come from, my summer staff would come from those programs.
Right.
And so now the collegiate world, we get them from all over the world. We get a lot of students from Japan.
Yeah.
And then we roll into March, and our deal is just almost by the month. I can tell you where I'm going to have people coming from, but truly international too. After March, we get the collegiate skiing teams in here, and then we start having our international students from everywhere, from Belarus, from Italy, from a lot of people come from Sweden. We've had a tremendous amount of people from Canada. We really have a great Canadian clientele. So that goes into like the middle to the end of March. All the people from up in the northern states, Wisconsin, Michigan, they want to get an early start. They come in. We've got a really neat program that we've promoted now for 3 years for the month of April for the specialists. It may be slalom once in the morning and then slalom in the afternoon. And they have a situation where it's relaxation, staying in the cottages on the lakes, having some nice dinners, lakeside, things like that. So, and then we get into our summer programs with the junior development programs. We do a ton of little junior development skiers.
Yeah.
And then our bread and butter that we've revolved into is getting new people on the water, the recreational business, the local recreational kids that never skied or wakeboarded or barefooted, anything like that before, coming in, and they're in our summer camp programs for a week at a time. So what that does for us, it brings them into a new world that they haven't been involved with, and their parents see that this is a family sport.
Yeah.
They see that I can have involvement with the entire family if I have a boat and I buy the equipment and I get out on the water. So a lot of our boat sales come from, we talk about their wakeboard boats, but not in my world. I mean, they are wakeboard boats, but in our world, there are water sports boats.
Yeah.
Because the family buys it, and they're going to ski behind it, they're going to surf behind it, they're going to wakeboard behind it, they're even going to barefoot behind it. And the way Mastercraft has their boats set up now, with all the different ballast systems and the plates and things like that, they can make these adjustments to where it satisfies the family's needs, and it's got so much room in it. So bringing the recreational market into our world of teaching them to water ski, and mom and dad come and have the opportunity to get in the boat on Friday, and then it's just revolves into a situation where they get involved and say, hey, we can do this as a family. And there's not a lot of things out there that you can do as a family.
Very well said.
Go to the baseball park and mom and dad can sit in the bleachers.
Right.
Okay? But boating is a whole different deal.
Yeah.
Everybody can get out there and be involved.
Yeah. No, it's very true. It's very true.
So that's what we've done. We've had to do that. I don't think you ever quit growing. I think with any type of business, it just happens to be a water ski school facility that you see, and you've been involved with me for a long time to see the growth, you're always trying to grow. When you quit trying to make something grow, then I think you die.
Yeah. Yeah.
So.
That's kind of like the same lesson my dad gave me when we started to do this pro tournament. He said, we're going to make small steps forward, but we're always going to make small steps forwards. There's not a year where we're not going to do anything new. Otherwise, that's when you start declining. And obviously, because of your passion for the sport, and of course you have a business within this industry, I know you're very passionate about, promoting water skiing. And I know that several times we talked about your belief that collegiate skiing has a huge role in the promotion of water skiing. Would you care to elaborate on that?
the collegiate water skiing is a perfect example of what I think we need to do at a different level, and I'll talk about that a little bit, to grow our sport.
Yeah.
Because the big question to all of us in the industry or have a passion for the sport, how are we going to grow our sport?
Right.
And a lot of people have a lot of good ideas out there. Well, collegiate skiing is the largest growing segment in water skiing.
Right.
And think about it for a minute. Why is it being so successful? You know, you went to ULL, and you were fortunate enough to be on a scholarship, and y'all had an incredible team over there, and you win national championships. But that's really not the heart and soul of collegiate water skiing.
Yep.
The heart and soul of collegiate water skiing are all the teams that are involved with it at an intramural level.
Mm-hmm.
That they sit on campus with the boat and they put their sign out and they say, do you want to join the water ski team? And here's a T-shirt for $10. And they create a club and they create a fraternity, and then they start going to tournaments. And they go to the tournaments to compete, but they're going to the tournaments for the total package of having all the involvement, the camaraderie with their other team members, and that's a team sport. So here's my thing. Marcus Brown we were doing an interview a year ago, maybe 6 months ago, and this was a question he brought up, and I can't get away from this. Now, do I have all the pieces of the puzzle put together in my mind? No. I know how we can do it if we can get the sponsorship. It always goes back to money. It always goes back to sponsorship. But the team concept at the elementary level, the team concept at the middle school level is what's going to grow our sport. Because in the ski school, when I bring the recreational skiers in, the first-time guys and girls, they're coming out of the elementary and middle school. So look at what happens. We monitor this with the ski school. Unbelievable. My wife is talking with parents every single day, and they're trying to schedule their week of ski school in with all the other things that they're involved with.
Right.
And when you listen to what you hear from those parents, it's the other camps and the other things that create camaraderie and the team sports, because the person wants to be involved with their friends. So how do we do that in water skiing? Here's the big deal. Okay, Jay, great idea. So how do you do it? Well, it starts with our association. For me, it starts with the American Water Ski Association, USA Water Ski, with inside that structure. And easier said than done, because it always comes down to being an issue with money.
Right.
If we could do this, the number of boat sales that are out there that are water sports related are tremendous, well outside of our companies that we deal with, Malibu, Mastercraft, Correct Craft, the guys that have the tournament water ski boats.
Yeah.
So we create a team concept. We have two problems. We got to have the money. Do we get it from the state? Do we get it from the local tax economy? Do we get it from sponsorship? What if we get all the boat companies involved? We've got Chaparral, we've got Sea Ray, we've got every one of these companies are selling thousands of boats involved with helping out a little bit for this particular program, putting money back into the potential of us creating team concept in the elementary and middle schools. I'm pretty sure, and I don't have the facts, she'd be a great one to talk to about this, but I know Jennifer Leachman LaPointe put a lot of effort out in high school sports back a few years ago trying to create it in Florida. And she probably would have some good insight on what the stepping stones are for that. But here we go. The second part of that deal is, where are we going to get the sites?
Mm-hmm.
And this is where I really think. Let's say right here in Zachary, and we're talking about like September, October, times that we're slow, even putting lights in here like they have down in Okehila, you could do night programs. There's a couple of places that actually do night programs for colleges, believe it or not. One's right there at South Texas State University at one of the local lakes there, where you actually get a credit to be able to go take water ski lessons. You know,
wow.
So that's a neat concept, because it creates money back to university. So what we're looking for is, number one, we got to have the site. Number two, we got to have the sponsorship. And those are my thoughts of our association has to go out and create this package and implement this marketing concept to the masses, not just to our industry. Our industry is too small to fund everything. Second part, where are we going to get the water? Okehili is a perfect example of what could happen, at least one facility like that in every state,
Right.
because it's county funded, it's county maintained, and it's done where the general public can use the lake. If you have a boat that's in their rule requirement, and you go and you buy your permit, and you follow their rules, you can ski on one of those 5 lakes anytime you want. It's accessible to the general water skier as long as you meet the rules and regulations. Well, here in Baton Rouge is a perfect example. We have a Recreational Parks Commission that has lakes on the facilities everywhere.
Right.
Okay? So then that's where you would have to develop the sites for these places that wouldn't have a ski school in their backyard to be able to make the program happen. So it's a 2-part deal. And would it take a lot of work? Unbelievable. Take a lot of money? Quite a bit. But would that concept work because it works in college? Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that would be a great way for us to grow our sport.
That's fascinating. And I did see that model. Like, I'd never been to Okehili before, strangely enough. And then I was involved with HO like at the Nationals, so I got to see the park. And when they told me how it works, which is exactly how you explained, I was blown away. Like, if you have your permit and you can launch the boat, you wait in line, you get to ski on amazing water. I'm shocked, and I do believe that, as you said, the true collegiate skiing, not this competitive collegiate skiing that I was involved with, which I'm super grateful for. But the true numbers stand in the club, right, going into campus with a sign. I've heard this story so many times. Like, have you ever water skied? Yes, one time when I was 11. Okay, join us, right? And then they introduce people into the sport. As a matter of fact, this weekend you had a collegiate skiing tournament here, and I met people that were here just because their friends joined the ski club a month ago.
Correct.
Right? So the potential for attraction of new numbers and new skiers is incredible.
Yeah, that model hadn't changed. I mean, we did the same thing in the early 80s at LSU.
Yeah.
We didn't have any money from LSU. We, in a 4-year period, built a team that made it to the Nationals. The women ended up being 3rd. They lived in a dormitory. I had enough time to be able to take them on the water and train them. But we did that. We had the boat on the site. We had the signs. We created a club. We'd have as many as 100 people join the club, and we give them one ski day and a barbecue and a T-shirt.
Yep.
You know, and then that money would fund those kids to be able to go to the competitions. And they've had the same success and maybe even more on the wakeboarding side of the curve now that this wakeboarding is at most all the colleges too.
Yep.
But that model hadn't changed. It works.
And it still works.
Yeah.
I interviewed Amanda Stevens about a month ago, who's the president of the Clemson Ski Club. And the way they do it is exactly like you explained. They have a ski boat and a wakeboard boat. Members can join. They can use the boat. Luckily, at Clemson, the water is next to campus, so it's easy and accessible. And they use their money to travel to tournaments. And I was looking at the rankings a few days ago. Clemson is now 4th in the nation.
Neat.
So that
Really cool.
model is working, you know. So they were able to attract, obviously, great skiers. Clemson University is a great academic institution. So that model still works to this day, you know. Jay, I think this kind of concludes the first part of our interview. We're going to get our listeners hooked on next week when we'll delve a little bit more into coaching.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Enjoyed it.
Thank you.